It's almost like you remember that 10 years ago I was able to bring back this award. So that's the title of the speech tonight, 10 years after my first MAV award. It was actually MAV, international MAV came a few years later, but still. And for those of you that have read the small introduction on the internet, you will see that this actually started long before this IMAV competition. It all started when I was a small kid, probably 6 years old, when I was sitting at my desk and started to dream of someday maybe I would be able to build not a helicopter. I didn't actually know exactly what I was thinking of building, but I was imagining a small aircraft that could kind of float in the air in front of me, stable, silent, and controllable. I think I was kind of thinking of a micro flying saucers or something like that. But I still remember that feeling. It's well, it's not 50 years ago, but it's it's hard to say that. But it's a long time ago, and I still remember the feeling when I thought of this silently floating aircraft in front of me. And as you all know, that actually happened. And what you see on this small video clip, it looks like it's several hundred years old, but it's basically because the camera I had available when I was able to do the first passively stable flight with a helicopter was a very simple camera. So my 7-year-old daughter, she filmed this flight, and I immediately knew that this could be of interest to a lot of people. For many years, I tried to build a passively stable helicopter. I read a lot of books about helicopters. All of the textbooks I read said that helicopters, they are inherently unstable. Still, I believe that maybe it's possible to make a passively stable helicopter. And of course, it was possible. You just had to think differently. But when I, as a small kid, started to think about this, it was absolutely, well, it was science fiction. Because the technology at that point wasn't good enough to do anything like that. And we had to do things very differently from what you normally did. But as you all will know, the fiction became reality. And, well, 10 years ago, I was able to bring back this award. And the award was for the best stationary flight micro UAV. So that's kind of contribute to the stability of the thing. And 10 years after this day in Toulouse in France, my company Prox Dynamics has just released the Block 2 of the PD-100 Black Hornet. And a lot of you will probably know that the Black Hornet is the first operational Nano UAV in the world. It's a pretty small helicopter. It weighs 16 grams. Most of you will also know 16 grams is not much. Very often when they talk about these small helicopters, we have to kind of explain how small is 16 grams or how light is 16 grams. 16 grams is actually the same weight as 3 sheets of printer paper. So if you take 3 sheets of paper, crush it together, you have approximately the same size and the same weight as our helicopter. And that helicopter has a GPS. It has a pretty advanced autopilot. It has 3 cameras. It has a pretty sophisticated radar link. And all of that is put into electronics that weighs less than what we heard about earlier today. Probably less than 2 grams for all the electronics combined in this helicopter. Tonight I'll try to give you a glimpse or a sense of the kind of the journey from my childhood dream via the IMAV competitions and up to where we are now when we are the world's leading nano US manufacturers. I guess probably the only one that actually has operational systems around the world. Let's step back again. Why did I start to work with passively stable, electrically powered helicopters? Well, part of the reason you can see up there in Norway. Well, this summer was very nice in Norway, but normally it's pretty cold during summertime and during wintertime. The fjords are frozen over, it's snow, it's pretty cold. If you want to fly model airplanes, you have to go out on the frozen fjords, and it is cold. So after more or less have destroyed the small blood vessels in my fingers and in my feet, I decided that enough is enough. I'll try to develop something I can fly in my living room. And so I did. After probably many 100 variations of test helicopters and probably thousands of crashes. By the way, this is pretty good therapy. You learn how to behave and calm yourself when you spend like a couple of weeks building a helicopter, and after 2 seconds it flies into the wall and is completely torn to pieces. Doing that one time is okay, but the 90th time you experience that, you have to kind of learn how to control yourself. But anyway, after like 1,000 crashes, I started to get closer. I started to see that it might actually be possible to build a passively stable helicopter. And passively stable, with that I mean a helicopter that can fly without servos, without gyros, without nothing. Just the main motor driving the propellers, and it still remains stable. And the trick to do this was, I started to think differently. The reason why I started to do this was because I wanted to get indoors into my warm living room. And then I started to think, what's different between indoor flying and outdoor flying? Well, one very obvious reason is the climate. It's warmer, but it's also less windy. And then I thought about outdoor helicopters, or helicopter. They were, before we started with these toy helicopters, helicopters were outdoor things. You didn't fly your helicopter indoors with the noisy, smoky motors and everything. And full-size helicopters, they were made to fly from point A to point B as quickly as possible. I didn't need to do that. I didn't need to have to cope with winds. I didn't need to have to fly fast. So I thought maybe it's possible to think different about this. And, well, what you see there are, I would say for those of you that are well, have had to put up with patents, this looks like patent drawings, and they are. When I finally got a helicopter to fly stably, I realized that this could be of interest to a lot of other guys as well. So, so I set out to get patents. Not because I wanted particularly to protect my new inventions or new ideas, but I knew that in order to be able to create products out of this, I needed to have a patent. If you want to talk to a toy company, it's always nice to start with a patent, unless you probably will be screwed, and after 1,000 crashes you don't want to be screwed. So, well, I had to go through that. Luckily that ended pretty well. So from being like more or less a hobby, I was able to start work with toy company, and through the hobby thing I was also lucky enough to get involved in some serious business with companies developing military equipment. So that's what we will go through very briefly. This passively stable rotor system I developed, as I said, don't need fancy electronics, gyros, things like that. Don't need servos. And of course that means you can build them pretty small, because you don't need all of this fancy stuff. So I did. I started to build them smaller and smaller. And I got in contact with a guy called Alexander living in Belgium. He is the guy that, after I was successful in the toy development, he continued on with his work and was also successful in designing toy helicopters. So he is the designer behind small toy helicopter from Silverlit called Pico C. I'm pretty sure that even though you might not recognize the name, most of you have actually seen that helicopter. And we decided that he would use his ideas, I would use my ideas, and we would try to build the world's smallest remote-controlled helicopter. Of course, he already had the world record for a small helicopter, but I would like to beat him. So we went on for many, many weeks, building smaller and smaller, and emailed and called and said, well, I've been able to get from 8.2 grams down to 8.1 gram. And then he called me and said, well, I've been able to get down to 7.5 gram. And after a couple of weeks, we decided that, well, as soon as we get below 7 gram, we call it a draw, and then we present everything. So of course we did that, and it happened to be that this was just before, or in early December 2003, and we decided that on the day, exactly 100 years since the Wright brothers did their first flight, we were presenting this, and it created a lot of attention in the relatively small RC micro airplane community, but still. And then we had to send out some nice videos. So he made his video, I made mine video. This video used to be available on the internet, on YouTube. I don't think it is anymore, and the reason is the sound. As most of you probably will know, this is the soundtrack from Top Gun, when Sony bought the rights to Top Gun, they scanned the internet, and everyone that used the soundtrack from Top Gun was deleted from YouTube. So it's hard to find this video on YouTube now, but it was pretty popular for a while. So what we see here is this small helicopter, and we'll soon see when we start up the propellers and I start move the helicopter, you will see something interesting. You see the rotors, they kind of tilt up and opposes the movement I'm doing. But when I tilt the helicopter slowly, it follows. That means the helicopter is very stable compared to the surrounding air. But you are still able to fly it around using, for instance, a horizontal tail rotor to tilt the helicopter forward, and it will start drift forward. And as you see, it was, well, it's probably hard to say serious testing behind it when we look at what we are doing in the company now, but it at that time it felt pretty serious. We were spending a lot of time to try to optimize everything and to make it as good as possible. So that's then the Proxflyer Micron. And then it went on and it went on. So then we had approximately one new helicopter every year. So this is the Nanoflyer. Again, new world record. And maybe the most interesting thing about that helicopter is that in the United States, DARPA was starting to think about a nano aerial vehicle program. And what they set out to do was, for most people, it seemed almost impossible. They were talking about a small hovering aircraft, less than 10 centimeter size, less than 10 gram weight, and it should fly. It should be able to fly for more than 20 minutes. At that time, it seemed almost impossible. But to prepare for that, we actually recorded a 25-minute flight with that helicopter to prove that it is possible. So we equipped the Nanoflyer with special batteries, and we were able to fly that helicopter for 25 minutes 10 years ago. That was quite a bit more than anything else. Well, it was the smallest helicopter to begin with, but still. Okay. In the middle down there, it's the helicopter besides a glass of red wine. It's not a huge glass of red wine, it's a small helicopter. To the right, it's a small fixed-wing model aircraft built by Matt Kinn, the Nano UAV manager for air environment. He's the guy that built the mechanical hummingbird that some of you might have heard about. So we are good friends, building models together, and one night up in the Catskill Mountains in New York, it rained heavily and we were flooded out. We had to actually evacuate to a school, and we had to register as Red Cross, almost refugees. We were allowed free meals and a telephone call home, and we had to spend the whole night there, and we started to compare models and took this picture. So that's pretty nice. But it didn't end there. Next year, Flyer, even smaller. Both the Nanoflyer and the Flyer made it to Washington in 2005 when DARPA finally started their Nano UAV program. So both of these two helicopters were used as proof of concept to demonstrate to the rest of the industry that it is actually possible to make hovering aircraft of this size. It does does actually work. And Picoflyer, I started to run out of names. So now it's the 1 gram helicopter. And I stopped there. It's pretty small. You can't use it for anything, but it has flown. When it flies, if someone walks past it, because of the vortices behind your body, when you walk through a room, it turns upside down and crashes. So it's absolutely not possible to use it for anything. But I proved it's possible to do things like this. Of course, I had to look into flapping wings as well. So in 2007, I think I got another award during an IMAV competition in Toulouse. And that was for this flapping wing aircraft. It was actually shown on French national television. So that's nice. I think at least it used to be on the Prox Dynamics website. So don't know if it's still there. So that was kind of the hobby side. I'll soon get into what that led to. 2 things. One of the things was toys. It really started with helicopters. So I'll come to that, but it also involved flapping wing creatures. I don't know if you can call it birds or anything. You can see the one to the right there. But it really started with the helicopters. And the Blade Runner that was released in August 2004, same year as I won my first IMAV trophy. The Blade Runner was released. It sold in more than 2 million copies. Probably at least that number if you, in addition, if you count the illegal copies. Everything is, of course, made in Asia when it has to do with toys. To get the price low enough, you have to go to China or other places in Asia. And the downside of that is it will be copied. But still, 2 million copies, and that was not only design. For many years, I had different designs. So the royalty income from that, as you will learn, was very important when we started Prox Dynamics. But we also did something else. I already mentioned DARPA. Because of what I've been able to do with my hobby projects, when DARPA started the program, I was contacted by different companies, Air Environment, NASA, and Draper Labs. When I was a small kid, when I was sitting with my desk dreaming about this small aircraft floating in front of me, my dream then was to actually work for NASA. And I still remember that the email telling NASA that thank you for the offer, but no thanks. That email stayed on my desktop for quite a while before I pressed send. That was a pretty hard decision to make, to say thank you, but no thanks to NASA. And instead, I accepted an offer to work for Air Environment, doing consultant work on their helicopters. In December 2007, started Prox Dynamics, spent a couple of months preparing everything, getting an office, building a lab, and in April 2008, we started Prox Dynamics. 1st of April. Wasn't that April joke? It was for real. And today we are 55 employees. We have been able to produce and sell micro or nano UAVs to allied forces more or less around the world. And the company has a mission of develop, produce, and sell airborne nano reconnaissance and surveillance systems and equipment for that for professional use. And we would like to be the world leading supplier of nano reconnaissance and surveillance systems. At the moment we are. So we have had to change that vision a little bit. Vision is now to stay in that position. So that's pretty challenging. And our customers are governmental customers. Basically, it's military forces. And what we have based the company on is this combination I mentioned between the micro helicopter experience and competence and the video conferencing competence. It's not a video conferencing system we are selling, but the technology behind is the same. So we have been able to assemble a team of really experts in this. And I don't mention that too much because we'll never finish, but the fact that we have very good engineers in different teams or in different sectors is important. To do what we have been able to do really requires a top team. Unless you have a really good team, you won't be able to do it. So we have spent a lot of time trying to pick the really good guys. So that's what we have been able to do over the last years. But we started out with 4 people. And we did something that's probably a little bit different from most other companies trying to do really small stuff. Instead of building something that worked a little bit bigger, easier to do, and then try to scale it down, we knew that it would be almost impossible to scale down to what we had in mind. So therefore, instead, we said, we will start to build a series of prototypes. They will all be the targeted size, the targeted weight. 10, 12 centimeter rotor diameter, 15 grams. As you will see, we ended up 16 and something, but still. We had a long series of prototypes. So instead of starting with a sophisticated big helicopter trying to shrink it down, we started with a simple helicopter with the right size, and then for every new prototype, we added more functionality, improved the performance, and step by step, we got closer and closer to a final product. So this is the Hornet 3 ready for takeoff. I jumped over Hornet 2, but you'll see that in this video clip. This is a video clip that's been on YouTube for a couple of years, but it still kind of shows some of what we were doing early in the development phase. So today we actually have all 10 prototypes in our small museum at Prox Dynamics. It all fits in a small cabinet. You don't need a big museum to get all the prototypes. But it's pretty neat. We have all the prototypes we built. They were in perfect flying condition when we stored them in the cabinet, and we still have them. Here we see like gust response, trying to blow on the helicopter. So pretty high gains on the autopilot there. Also some step responses. I think we saw something much bigger like that when Eric had his presentation this morning. So of course this is the things you typically go through when you are developing new systems like this. So then we have here the hands-off stability. That's of course important in itself, but it's the autopilot that flies the system. So as I said, a long series of prototypes, all of them more sophisticated than the previous one. And when we came to the Hornet 4, we started to put a full body on, and it started to look like a real helicopter. What's inside the Hornet? To get the performance we are looking at, it's not possible to buy off-the-shelf part. So the fact is that in the Black Hornet, apart from buying electronic components like microprocessors and memory and resistors, things like that, 100% of the helicopter is designed specifically for the helicopter. Everything is built under the microscope, and everything is very precisely. Of course, it is pretty costly, but we also get pretty decent performance. I think I'll probably touch in on some of the performance later, but just to give you an kind of a feeling for what's possible to do when you know what you are doing and really push the technology to the extremes. Earlier this summer, we decided that we would test some new battery technology, and at the same time we would really optimize and fine-tune the motors, the rotors, and everything else to see how long is it possible to fly a Nano UAV on a single battery charge. And again, this you won't find on any publications on the internet. But the fact is that this optimized version of the PD-100 Black Hornet this summer flew for almost 1 hour on a real mission. Well, not an operational mission, but I mean with all systems running, all the cameras running, the GPS, the radio link, everything up and running. And we are able to fly for almost an hour. Within 1 day, we did 3 flights, more than 55 minutes in this configuration. Back to Hornet 4, almost ready for takeoff, 16 grams. This is 4 years ago. Very early prototypes, so the picture quality is, well, it's not great, but it's the very first version of the system. It doesn't look anything like this now, but still it's something that for 4 years ago we were pretty happy about where we were at the moment. This small video clip, I don't think that has been shown publicly before either. If you read carefully in the start there, it was used when we discussed this with some US customers. We'll soon see same that you just saw of the gas pumps. We are running live video at low resolution, and then we have the possibility to download high resolution images while the video is running. So these are examples of some of the higher resolution still images. Very early version of the graphics of the ground controller there. So what's inside this helicopter? Well, it's basically very similar to a big helicopter. We did a lot of calculations and simulations to figure out what we should build. And we ended up with a standard helicopter configuration. Many reasons for that. So those of you that don't want to go to sleep tonight, we can spend the rest of the evening discussing that. But this tiny helicopter has a source plate It has 3 servos, meaning that we have full collective and cyclic control. We have a GPS, we have a full autopilot, pressure, altitude measurements, compass, everything. We have not 1 camera in the front, we have actually 3 cameras, so we can cover everything from straight forward to straight down. And we have a pretty robust radio link at the back there. So using that, we are able to fly in pretty difficult conditions and still have good communication with the helicopter. In addition to what we call snapshots, the still images and the live video, we don't download all kinds of well, metadata, black box that. Servo positions, rotor RPM or rotor set RPM, rotor actual RPM, same with the servos, all attitude angles, all sensor data, positions, more or less everything you can think of is downloaded continuously in addition to the live video. And we also have a pretty advanced simulator. Use that for 2 things. One is to trim all the gains and parameters of the autopilot before you fly. So actually all the 10 prototypes we built flew stable on the first flight. So we're pretty proud of that. We were able to simulate everything before we took off for the first time. All the details of the helicopter is the details they are modeled in the simulator. All the mechanics, the servos, well, how the motors perform, everything. And even though this is a small helicopter, it's pretty easy to test flight. Just clear a space in the office and test flight. But still, it was very important for us to know what we were doing. Therefore, we did all of these simulations before every prototype, so we had full control over everything. When we have this, we can of course use this as a very nice tool to teach people how to use the system. So we have a full simulator that could be used with hardware in the loop. You can use your normal base station, connect that to your laptop, run the proper software, and you can do simulated missions with your own gear in the loop. GPS testing in the middle of the winter in Norway, that's a challenge. Luckily we had an office with a flat roof so we can shuffle away all the snow and do GPS testing. It's kind of hard to see what we are doing, but under that tent we have a small model train track. And we have small model trains that run on that track. And on top of that train, the small prototype of the PD-100 is strapped. And we have put magnets along the track, so the magnetometer of the helicopter picks up exactly where it is. So we can then characterize the GPS, look at latency and accuracy and everything. Small trick when you have to characterize a GPS in the winter in Norway. Other pretty interesting thing, in Norway we are famous for having something called freezing fog. Airbus actually sent their new big airplane to Oslo as one of the first places it went outside France to test it in freezing fog conditions. And that also has an effect on nano UAVs. So what you see there is actually ice built up on the rotors. We were kind of wondering what was going on the first time we experienced this, because the helicopter suddenly started to fall out of the sky. Not violently, but just slowly falling to the ground, and we could not figure out what it was until we actually started looking carefully. This all leads to the first operational nano UAV system, PD-100 Black Hornet, PRS we call it, Personal Reconnaissance System. And we are looking further to a family of systems. VRS is the same system put in a vehicle, integrated with the vehicle systems. Lot of interest on that. Again, the helicopter. This is probably a video clip that some of you have seen before. It's from Discovery Channel and from last summer.
This team is taking it farther and faster than it's ever gone before.
Something we have tested many times, but not from that far out and that high.
Paul is the drone's target. He's going to hide about 1 kilometer away at the top of a small cliff, leaving time for the rest of the team to give the Hornet drone, officially called
this story was, well, we kind of pretended that we were doing something that we had never tested before, but when you invite the television to, or accept the television for something like this, of course, we have tested it before.
Out of the box. Once we're ready to fly and we have the helicopter out, I can hold this here and put the pocket-sized base station in my back pocket. It's ready to go when you're ready. Now
seems like we'll be here for a while.
It quickly reaches a top speed of about 20 clicks.
The smaller and lighter you are able to make it, the more difficult it is, of course, to detect.
The drone is so stealthy, even our camera has a hard time finding it. But behind its playful appearance is a highly sophisticated military tool containing 3 cameras.
It works actually like a pair of flying binoculars.
The British military uses those flying binoculars to scope out snipers in Afghanistan. They also use it to safely preview what's ahead.
Instead of going in with a lot of force, like blowing your way through walls and stuff, we could stop a couple of 100 meters outside that area, launch the PD-100 and fly over and have a look.
The concept came to Peter Muren when he was a kid.
I still remember a dream I had that one day I would
you all already heard about that, that dream. So this then goes on to show the helicopter. We fly up to a mountaintop and get back and pretend that we are very excited about this. So that's the discovery thing. So what can the helicopter actually do? Not many other systems can do this within a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds. So that's pretty neat. And we also have the helicopter in areas that are kind of different from normal environment we have in Norway. So this being a system developed at least initially for military use, what's the typical concept of operation? Well, there are 2 ways of actually operating the helicopter. One is like the ad hoc missions. We just bring out the helicopter, acquire GPS, get it in the air, use the video to fly it, almost like a first-person view thing, but it still is the autopilot flying the helicopter. So if you let go of the controller, the helicopter just stops, stay put until you decide to press the forward button again. Or you could put up a pre-planned mission using GPS waypoints and send it out to fly a pre-programmed mission. And not very big surprise that a lot of military guys are interested in this. And the ones that really started to press us to get this finished and get this out as a product was the British Army. Unfortunately, we are not able to talk very much about the customers, but UK Army, they have sent out press releases and video clips and well, started to talk about how they are using the Black Hornet. So therefore we are able to talk a little bit about it. System trials, all the images in the middle there are from the helicopter in Norway, in UK, and in Cyprus. Pretty hectic to go to Cyprus to demonstrate this for the UK Army. And if you look at the top pictures, it's not very far from what we experienced here yesterday and the day before. Bunch of guys out in the field trying to figure out what went wrong. Luckily, we were able to figure out what went wrong, and everything went well in the end. Hence the picture down to the right there. We were able to relax a little bit in the end. In between, the team leader got a little bit of action. This was a huge success. And the UK Army decided that they wanted to deploy the Black Hornet in big numbers. And, well, to conclude the story about how we went from a childhood dream through IMAV competition into company developing and selling nano UAVs for operational use. We'll just look at some of the comments from the UK Army that actually have used the system for 2 years now. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your very inspiring talk. I believe a lot of young guys here in the audience are very inspired and yeah, learn from you how fun can turn in something beautiful like this. I want to ask you a few questions about the talk. Some things you didn't pick up, but I think it's fun to talk to the audience here. If we see the toys, the first toys that were released, they had some pretty strange stripes on the rotor. I heard somewhere that the stripes on the rotor were because you made at home the rotor blades on the size of a coffee mug. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit?
Yeah. I don't know if you all saw. I guess you have heard the history before, so you knew what to look for. But on the toy helicopters, on the rotors, there are ridges or stripes. When I started to develop toy helicopters or designs for toy company, I was told that I have to use low-cost, almost inexpensive materials. Couldn't use carbon fiber and the fancy stuff I'd normally used. So then I tried to figure out, okay, what could I use instead? So I started to look around, and I was working, as I mentioned, in the company called Tandberg, doing video conferencing systems at that time. Company was pretty big, and of course we then had coffee machines with these blister coffee cups with the ridges to make them stiff. So I cut the blades out of coffee cups like that. The ridges was not intentional. It was just because they were in the coffee cups. And I never intended the factory in China to copy that. So I told them, well, don't worry about that. But somehow they were convinced that this rills or these stripes in the rotor blade was essential to have a stable helicopter. So they refused to take them out. So that's why all my toy helicopters have those stripes because originally they came from the coffee cups at Hamburg.
So you see, aerodynamics is inspired by coffee. And a last question, we saw with the product you presented that there are 2 Black Hornets in there. Why are there 2 in there?
You mean two in each kit? Yeah. 2 reasons. One is that, well, this is a military system, and it simply has to work. It's hard to guarantee that a helicopter will work every time you bring it out of the box. So then it's nice to have 2. In case once in a while something goes wrong with the first one, you always have the second one. So that's one reason. The other reason is that if you are looking at something and nothing happens, and you start to get low on battery charge, you have to bring the helicopter back to charge it. And then it's of course very nice to have a new helicopter ready to go in the box. So you just release the second one, that takes over for the first one while you are charging the first one. So the system is made so that when you put the helicopter back in the base station, close the lid, it automatically recharges within 20, 25, 30 minutes. So that's the 2 most important reasons.
So you basically have always something in the air. When one is flying, you can recharge the other one. Yep. That's nice. Thank you for being so inspiring for us. And we will, I don't have the present with me, but we will give you a nice umbrella for the Dutch weather so that you can get safely home and don't get wet. Thank you very much for being here.